It's the beginning of May. It's Taurus season finally, thank God. I love Taurus season. My birthday is right around the corner, and I missed the ending of Q1, but I thought that I would still go through and talk about the books that I've read so far in 2025. The first one I read this year was Where Are You, Echo Blue? And I loved this book. As I was going through on this list, I realized that I gave everything that I've read so far, I think they all have 5 stars. So it's a little bit redundant for me to say that I loved all of these books, but I genuinely did. So, Where Are You, Echo Blue? It follows this 90s child star who disappears. And the book takes place in the early 2000s. So, she's a famous child star from the 90s. Our main character has been a huge fan of her for years. And we actually go back and forth between their two viewpoints. So, the child star herself and then the super fan. And the child star disappears suddenly. And the press is talking about it for a little bit, but then it's not really getting the publicity that our other main character thinks that it deserves. And now that she's grown up, she's a journalist, she wants to investigate this for herself. So she convinces her boss to put her on this assignment and to let her find Echo Blue, find her favorite child star. And what makes it really interesting is that she is such a super fan of hers. So we see like where is the line between being a really big fan of someone and wanting to advocate for them and the way that they're treated as the celebrity, but then also being obsessed with them and also being part of the problem. Like where does that line stop? So there's some really good like meta commentary going on within the book. And yeah, we see our main character, like how far will she go to get the story that she wants, and then the commentary on how we treat child stars, celebrities, especially in the 90s and the 2000s, but obviously even so today, like that commentary in there is also very interesting. So I really loved it. I loved the story itself, the way it was written. Like it was a really great book, but then there's also so much really good commentary in it as well. So lots of good layers to this book. So the second one that I read was called Come As You Are, and that's one that even though this book is several years old, it had a long list at the library. So it came in and I had to read it. I had to get it back within a couple of days. So I was like, just get it done. You've been waiting on it forever. Like you can't keep, I hate like checking something out and then you get it and then you don't have time to read it and then you return it and it kind of feels like a waste. So I was like, I had to just go through this book. It's doctor backed research by a woman about women's bodies and sexuality and sexual desire. And it's also, there's a little anatomy lesson at the beginning that I just found to be really interesting because it basically compared and said that men and women, we have exactly the same, not exactly the same parts, but we have like the same things just expressed in different ways. If that, I'm not sure if that like makes any sense, but it does when you read the book. And it's like the education that we wish we had in high school and college. Like if you could read it from a woman, it's heavily researched, like just to understand more of your own body from like a physical like function standpoint. Yeah, so that one's really popular. There's a whole chapter on stress and how stress just like completely kills basically like everything like in your life. So that was really interesting as well. So just a really informative read if you're looking for more information on that topic. And next I read Pamela Anderson's cookbook called I Love You, which I had been really excited about this ever since she announced it when I think it was her Netflix show, and then there's also a show streaming on Hulu where she just like is like flouncing around her farm in like these like little white sundresses and like faded jeans and like a white t-shirt with like garden boots. Like she's just a complete vibe. And you see her talking about like her sourdough and her recipes and gardening and just doing all this stuff. And so it just felt like such like a fantasy, like a girlhood world. So when she like I kept thinking that I'm like, I want her sourdough recipe. I've been like trying to make one. Hers just looks so good. I'm like, I want her sourdough recipe. So like this woman needs to have a cookbook, and she finally did. So I've been waiting for it for a long time. So I actually did go through and flip through every recipe, like marked the ones that I wanted. So there's a lot of good stuff in there, even if like I'm not vegan and this is a vegan cookbook. So it's just nice to give you ideas for like side dishes or like gardening and that kind of stuff. So yeah, love her. Loved this one. Next, I read The Wedding People, which at first we picked this one for book club. And since it is such a popular book and it's on, I think, like the Good Morning America, I think the Read with Jenna book club, like it was on so many other book clubs. I'm like, is this really going to be good or is it overhyped? Because I feel like I've been burned so many times before by books that they say that they're going to be hype and they're so popular and then they're just like, I just don't like them. So I'll be honest, I was like, had some healthy skepticism going into this one, but I was completely proven wrong. I loved this book so much. I loved the characters. Like, I just wanted to be in like the world that she was creating. There's like a really good mix between, like, there were lines in there that were funny that made me like laugh, like actually laugh out loud, which I obviously don't always do from a book. And there were parts of it too, like, I don't know why, maybe because it was like a book club like pick, and I don't know why I thought it was going to be like a rom-com or like a romance. But there's so much more to it. Like, there are actually parts of it that were really dark, like especially in the beginning. I was like reading some of this, I'm like, oh my god, this is so dark. And I was reading it, I think, like in the middle of winter when we just had the most horrible temperatures and weather in January and February here in Michigan. So I was kind of like, I'm like, this is just a little depressing, but it was so reflective, so just observant and deeply emotional. But then there were so many lines in there that were just funny and just made me laugh because they were so like observant and so true, just talking about wedding culture, friendships, relationships. And I realized I didn't explain what this one is about, but Phoebe is our main character, and she shows up at this fancy hotel in Rhode Island to have this is like her dream hotel she's always wanted to go to with her husband, but she shows up by herself. And there's this woman has rented it out for her wedding and the whole hotel, and it's completely full of her wedding guests. And so the concierge at the front desk assumes that she is there for the wedding, but she's not. So the our main character Phoebe and the bride, they meet, and you get to know their personalities, how they're so completely different, but then just how they work together and then their own relationships. And it's so interesting, and talking about like relationships with like the mom during a wedding and then like bride and groom and just everything. It was really, really good. I really enjoyed this one. Next, I read Spooky Lakes, which I had been waiting on as well. That one, I thought it would be so fun to read after seeing the TikTok series. And she does talk about Lake Superior in the book, which I live in Michigan, so I was like excited to see a little Michigan love in there. And Lake Superior is just like the lore when you're from Michigan is just really interesting. So this one was really interesting. The illustrations are beautiful. The author illustrates everything herself. And just all the different lakes and everything that you learn about throughout the world, you're like the world's crazy. Like the more you read and like learn about the world, it's just wild. So there's lakes with like entire like underwater forests with like skeletons, radioactive lakes, like lakes like miles down under the ice in Antarctica, like just some of the craziest stuff. So if you're interested at all in like nature, anything, I definitely recommend this one. Next, I read Orbital, which follows 6 astronauts as they circle the Earth in their little space station for 24 hours. And this one, if you're someone who's like can get claustrophobic or like me, or afraid of heights, or like you just when you read a book you really put yourself in this scenario. For me reading this, like I was like, get me out of this little spaceship. Like I do not want to be I don't want to be like orbiting around the Earth. This one was so interesting because it was so well researched and well written about what the astronauts endure like on their bodies, that just stuff that you wouldn't even think about. But it's like obviously when you're in a space that has no gravity and like stuff that you don't even think about, of like, oh yeah, like they are drinking their own like recycled filtered pee, because like how you can't fly up to space with like that many gallons of water. And then like, yeah, your trash, like the trash that you make in space just exists in space like forever. So yeah, just really interesting from that perspective, but then also just the reflections that they have on Earth, because like they're literally looking down on it and reflecting back on like the people that are there, but then also you're reflecting back on like who you are as a person like up here in space. So just a really, really thoughtful, really like reflective, makes you think, but then it is really beautiful. Like you do feel like you are up in space, like looking down on Earth, like you feel like you're deep in the story of like what it would be like to be up there. So yeah, just really beautiful, really interesting. Next, I read Pure Innocent Fun, which is a collection of essays about pop culture. And I should do a separate video on this book because like I literally took so many notes, like so much like highlighted, just had a lot to say and a lot to think about from this book. The author also has a podcast that I've listened to for years, so I highly recommend that, the podcast as well, if you're interested at all in pop culture. It's so funny, but it also I really appreciate that it takes it seriously, because as someone who's like always loved pop culture, reality TV, just like that whole world, I think a lot of people really look down on it and have like it's like lesser than, or it's like less noble of like a pursuit, but it's like it is our culture. It is like it shapes our lives whether you like want to realize it or not. And it's really interesting because thinking about it from his perspective when he's writing it, and we're both like millennials, I think we're like basically the same age, but the way that he was explaining things as if like Gen Z or like someone younger would be reading it, it was so funny because it just made me feel so like old and like a dinosaur, and just the stuff that he was explaining, like coming home and like watching a VHS, and like how your world really revolves around like what VHS is that like you owned at home, or if you recorded something on the DVR and like your dad accidentally erased it, like your mom would like want to kill your dad, and just like there was so much nostalgia for me in it. The things that he was explaining, I was like, oh, this really takes me back to being a kid during that time, or like growing up and thinking about the media and the content that you consumed while you're growing up, and how that really shapes like your childhood and your experiences. Yeah, this one was so good, and the cover is beautiful. I really, really loved the cover design. So if you're at all a fan of pop culture, early 2000s culture, highly recommend this one. Hardly Strangers was the next one that I read, and this one was really fun. It's a little novella. I actually got it as an ebook, which most of the time I'm always getting physical books either from the library, or sometimes I'll like buy them from my local bookstore. I'll buy like used books. But I'm hardly ever get an ebook because I just need a physical copy. I don't know if it's like a spatial awareness thing or what, but I feel like I can just get lost on like on where I am. So I appreciated that the ebooks, or that the books that have been published by this 831 Stories, which is like a modern romance novel publisher, the books that have come out from them are all like short and sweet, like perfect, like just enough to where you can actually have a good story to where you're into it and you're into the romance and the plot, but then you're not like you don't have to read 500-600 pages of fluff and like all this other stuff. So they're the perfect length, their books are. And yeah, I read this one as an ebook, and I was able to like just fly right through it and not get lost, so appreciated that. But this one was really fun. So this woman has been pining after this guy for a couple months, and she's finally gotten him, like he's going to go out on a date. They're going to go on a date together, meet up at the bar. I'll let you decide like how we feel about this guy or not. I don't want to give like too much away. But while she's waiting for him to show up at the bar, this other guy is like looking at her, and they kind of have this little interaction. Um, it's this other guy who is who is the front man of an Irish punk band. Where's it going to go for the rest of the night? Like, is she going to go home with one of the guys? Like, none of the guys? Like, how is it going to go? So this one is perfect. It's like that perfect fantasy of like running into a celebrity at the bar, and you have a little meet cute, and then where does it go? I love reading the like dedication or the acknowledgement section at the end of a book. And I mean, of course, but this author like basically had a similar thing happen in real life. That was like the gist that I got from the story, which to me just made it even better. So yeah, really, really loved this one. The next one that I read was True Biz, and this one I actually did as an audiobook. This was for our book club as well. And I was really bad because I was into this other book that I was reading that was like almost 600 pages, and I like didn't want to stop reading that one. So I waited too long to start this one, and I never really listen to audiobooks either because sometimes I like zone out and I'm not paying attention and then I get lost. And I read at the end of it, I had to read it at like 1.5 speed because like I literally finished it like an hour before I had to leave for book club. So that's my one caveat on it. I think it sounded like in the physical book there was a lot to it. Like there were a lot of visuals in it for sign language in terms of how to sign things. And there was actual like signing in the book as well. So when they had that in the audiobook, they had a different voice to denote like what was signing and like what was just like narration. But I think that was one thing I missed out on in the audiobook. But I loved this one as well. True Biz follows the teenagers at a residential school for the deaf. And we have so many different viewpoints in this one. And it was interesting, even when we discussed it at book club, like we all agreed, like, we're like, there's so many viewpoints in this. There's so many different representation of the deaf community. There's just like so many different perspectives. Like we wish we would get more of one story and like maybe less of the other. Like we had like different commentary on it, but we were like, this is one book, like it can't represent the entire experience of an entire community. So yeah, just like to have that representation out there of like so many different stories, we thought was great. And the story itself, like very realistic, we felt. I don't want to say like too much to give it away, but yeah, really, really liked this one too. And the one that I got caught up reading was called By Any Other Name. And this one had two storylines going on at the same time. So it goes back to Shakespeare's time, and I didn't know about this theory because maybe I didn't pay enough attention in school, or I feel like I would have remembered this if we talked about it, but I don't remember this ever being mentioned. There's this theory that Shakespeare actually didn't write his plays. The thought is that there was probably a troupe of people behind him that were writing the plays, and it would have been from people that couldn't be published at the time in society. So women or royalty or just people that couldn't have their name attached to plays, because at the time, like theater and the arts and writing, those were considered like less than pursuits or like dirty pursuits. There's this theory that Amelia Bassano was one of the women that wrote several of Shakespeare's plays. Not all of them, but like a decent amount of them. This book is so heavily researched, and even though it is fiction, it's like based so heavily on her research. So if you want to know more about the like what she uncovered behind it as to why they think that she was the one who wrote many of the plays, like highly recommend this book. Her research, I actually listened to an author talk with her through my library that was like a virtual talk, and she talked so much about her research, and like it imitated life, like her book imitated real life. There's a little sub like romance plot within Amelia Bassano's plot line in the book. She ended up going to this museum, and there was this unnamed gentleman. Their two like paintings were together, so it was Amelia Bassano and then this unnamed gentleman. And it turned out that basically the storyline romance that she gave her in the book was probably like the real life actual love that she had. So that was just fascinating, because sometimes I think with authors, like the stories that they're telling, sometimes I'm like, where did they come from? Like, were they divinely placed, or like, because I'm like, who plunked that idea in your head? That's like a complete side note, but so yeah, just learning that like this idea that she had for the book ended up being something that was real. I'm like, that feels divinely placed to me. So anyways, that's my like little side note. But so that's one storyline that we get, and then the other storyline we get is present day, and it's this playwright in New York that is trying to get her like play published and put on stage, and her play ends up being submitted under a man's name, and then it goes on to, well, actually I won't give like too much away, but basically we follow like present day of she's trying to have her play like put on stage, and she ends up like using a man's name to try to get the recognition, and there's like this whole other mess that comes with that. I really loved this. I really loved both storylines, and even the present day storyline was based on the author herself, who was trying to get her play published too. She said in her author talk, the things that you see in the book that they told her as to why they couldn't publish her book, like, or publish her play, those were things that were said to her. So yeah, so there's so many layers to this book. But one thing that I did really love about all the characters is that they all commit some type of wrong at one point, like wrong to each other, like wrong to themselves. And I really enjoyed the fact that it wasn't like, not all the characters were like these perfect, like, oh, she's a woman trying to get her play published and she's perfect and she can't get it done. It was like, no, she made some mistakes, and we'll see, like, like, will people forgive her? Like, can you ask for forgiveness? Where does it go from there? So I really liked all of those layers to it. And this one was long. It was almost like 600 pages, but I loved all of it. I didn't feel like any part of it was wasted. And yeah, I was just really invested in the story, really invested in the research. This was one where at the end, a lot of it was cited, and there were like longer notes at the end, and we're all fascinating. The whole thing was fascinating. And I'm not even like big into Shakespeare. I was never, I don't know, I never like got super into it like when we read the plays in high school or anything. So, and I still really love this. So you don't need to be like a Shakespeare lover to love this book. And the last one that I read so far in 2025 is called The Favorites. And this one follows two skaters who are clinging to each other from their turbulent childhoods in a suburb in northern Chicago off of Lake Michigan. So they're clinging to each other, and then they're also clinging to their dreams of being Olympians. And we follow them like from their partnership, their love for each other, their love for skating, their like fierce competitiveness, and like that relentless drive of wanting to win and be an Olympian, and how that can burn you out, and what is winning at the end of the day. Like, what does that mean, like, for the rest of your life? This one was so good. I'm still thinking about it. I want to talk about it with someone. There's so much drama, so much tension. There's like so many twists and turns that keep coming throughout the book. It wasn't just like one big drama and then that's that. Like, it just kept like rolling through. And I got angry at certain parts of this book, which doesn't, I feel like I don't always get swept up, but that, like, I was super angry at some parts. I felt like compassion at other parts. And I was like on the edge of my seat reading some of their skates, some of their competitions to see how they would do. Like, I was tense, which is not something that I even feel for real life sports. So just, yeah, hats off to the author and her writing. Like, beyond the story itself, there's so much commentary on how we treat male and female athletes, like being an Olympian, and then by like your mid 20s, you're old news. And then it's like, what do you do with the rest of your life? Like, there's so much other commentary and layers to this book outside of like the story itself, with just like the drama and everything was great, like on its own. But then there's so much extra commentary in there too. I took pictures of certain quotes in the book and I wanted to post them, but they would give away parts of the book and they were from like the end of it. So I didn't want to do that. This one was really good and I can't stop thinking about it. So I would definitely recommend. That is everything I've read so far in 2025. It's the beginning of May. So yeah, so for the first 4 months, those are the ones that I have read and enjoyed. A lot of fiction. They were all like, I gave them all 5 stars in my my Storygraph app. So yeah, really interesting. But let me know if you've read any of these. I want to hear your opinion. And every week I write on Substack about the books that I'm reading. I do like a little review and little book recommendations. So if you want more from me, I will leave the link to that in the comments. Bye.